Hello, I'm Adam Wren,
And I'm Dasha Burns. It is Monday, August 18th.
and this is the Playbook Podcast.
Happy Monday, Adam.
Happy Monday, Dasha. Thanks so much for joining. Let's get right to what's driving the day today. We have yet another massive meeting taking place with huge geopolitical implications. Whereas on Friday, the biggest story in politics was a summit in Alaska between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Today, the biggest story is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's arrival in Washington to meet with President Trump. Joining him here in DC to help press his case is a collection of some of the most high-profile European heads of states, among them European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, British PM Keir Starmer, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, Italian Prime Minister Giorgio Meloni, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Dasha, a number of these folks have gone out of their way to both praise Trump and build relationships with him. I'm thinking of, in particular, Keir Starmer and also Finnish President Alexander Stubb.
And the NATO secretary, Mark Rutte. I mean, they've all figured out the sort of the Trump whisperer tone that they need to use to try to get him on their side.
I'm sort of fascinated by that. What do you make of the news sort of breaking after the Putin Trump summit that all of these folks were coming to Washington's sort of Avengers style?
Avengers style is right. I mean, look, this is it feels like this thing is careening towards some sort of conclusion, and of course these European partners really want to be a part of it. One thing that does feel different this time around than the first administration, when Trump would go into these big moments, of course Ukraine wasn't at the table. Europeans weren't at the table. This was a one-on-one, but there was significant communication between President Trump and the EU and Zelensky, both before and afterwards. And the fact that all of these folks are coming to the White House now. Look, the White House's position was they want NATO and Europe to take a bigger role in their own defense spending and in the Ukrainian conflict with Russia. And they did that. They did put their cards on the table, and so now the reciprocation from the White House is keep them involved, bring them to the table, and that's what's happening now. Now I'm sure a lot of them would have loved to be in Alaska and Anchorage, particularly Zelensky, but I was told by White House officials ahead of the Alaska summit they were not planning to walk out of there with a deal. Now I think that that presser kind of stunned everybody, and the fact that it wasn't really a press conference, and the difference in sort of tone and style and demeanor between President Trump and President Putin was striking. But there was never going to be a deal walking out of that. I think now this is like the second really pivotal step here. What happened behind closed doors with Putin? How does that translate to what's going to happen behind closed doors with Zelensky and these European leaders? There's so much subtext that we are not privy to, that it's going to play a really critical role here.
Yeah, I'm really just utterly rapt at the high stakes shuttle diplomacy that we're seeing play out. What's really interesting to me is, I talked to former National Security Council official Fiona Hill, who wrote the preeminent biography of Vladimir Putin. Of course, has tangled with Trump occasionally, testified against him in his first impeachment hearing. But what she told me is that Trump really sort of surrendered the narrative to Vladimir Putin on Friday. We heard Vladimir Putin open up the press conference on Friday. Trump spoke for just 3 minutes compared to about twice that amount of time for Putin. And she also is telling me that she thinks that the big deliverable that Trump got out of the press conference Friday was the fact that Putin agreed with Trump that the war would never have started had Trump been president. And she says that's because Trump wouldn't have likely backed Ukraine in a way that made the war, that it would have been a decimation of Ukraine. But all of it is sort of on both sides a counterfactual that doesn't really matter for our purposes right now. Trump is clearly upset about the coverage that he's getting from the Friday summit. He posted to Truth Social last night about that.
This is an unusual position for President Trump in terms of the kind of diplomacy that has to be done, the negotiations that have to be done with an entity like Russia. There is a lot, like I said, in the subtext, in the stuff that is not actually said out loud. And for Trump, who tends to be kind of an open book, he tends to say what's on his mind. He does it, tends to reveal pretty easily where he's at in any given moment on any given issue. This is one where he really can't do that. And right now, for me, it's hard to tell until we do our reporting and until we see some of the action items really come out of these meetings, what the closed door impact really was, right? Because there's it's uncomfortable for the president to not be able to reveal a lot. You saw him really try to walk that line in that Sean Hannity interview where he was like, I regret doing this because there's a whole lot that I can't and don't want to say for a number of reasons. And that is not comfortable footing for President Trump.
He is on kind of a high wire here and is trying to navigate a lot of competing interests.
Putin is a pro at this. I mean, there are so many presidents that have thought that they could very easily handle this guy. They know him. They can figure it out. Turns out that he is a master of the dark arts in a way that very few people are, and so it's much more difficult once you're actually in that chair than the theorizing around it. And so I think President Trump got a taste of that, but there is a whole lot more that is coming out of this, and a lot that we really still don't know.
Yeah, and we'll have much more in today's Playbook newsletter. The second story for your radar today is also unfolding in DC as President Trump's surge of federal agents and National Guard troops ramps up. Over the weekend, 3 Republican states, West Virginia, Ohio, and South Carolina, said they will send up to 750 National Guard troops to DC, effectively doubling the number of troops mobilized in the district. And the Wall Street Journal scooped on Saturday that plans are underway for them to start carrying weapons, which is a major shift from this first week of the federal push in Washington. Dasha, it seems like things are getting tense. We saw some skirmishes, some crowdsourced videos about what's happening on the streets of DC. What's the end game here from the White House?
I mean, President Trump goes 0 to 60 on all of these things. Everything is an emergency and everything is full force all the time. And this is no exception to that. And I think when it comes to the crime issue in DC, there's a number of factors here. First, I've been told by White House sources that this is something that's been on his mind since term one. It's not something that he was able to do. It wasn't a top priority. But this time around, it is, and in part because of what you've heard him talk about with the Capitol being this representation of the United States. He wants to beautify it. This is his version of that, and it's there's a law and order piece that we've talked about, Adam, where this is an area where the Republican Party and Trump feels he has solid footing, right? He feels like this is a winning issue. There's also the piece of like forcing the Trumpification upon a liberal city, right? Like this is similar to what we're seeing with the Kennedy Center, with what he wants to do with the Smithsonian, with the beautification, as he calls it, of the White House as well. Like this is part and parcel of him placing his image in a way that's going to be hard to undo for future administrations onto the nation's capital. There's been a lot about this term for him that really is about legacy and trying to have that imprint. The result in this case is seeing this federalization, this militarization of policing in the nation's capital, and you've got a real clash, both on the sort of you know practical legal front and on the cultural front here. Yeah, I live near Howard University. There's a bunch of kids moving in right now, and there's a really heavy police presence there, and that has an impact when you are 18 years old and moving into your college dorm room, and your campus is surrounded by officers. So there's a real effect, and there's a sort of philosophical long term goal here as well.
And the third story for your radar today comes from California, where the redistricting push is really coming into focus this week. Today, the legislation to call for a special election will be published, beginning the process that will culminate with 4 votes later this week. Lawmakers in the Democratic controlled legislature are expected to approve the maps and related legislation by Thursday. Then voters would have the final say in November. Dasha, I am struck by how much this redistricting battle has raised the profiles of not only Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, but particularly California Governor Gavin Newsom. You've got the Governor Press Office X account that is just blowing up my feed. Typically, my For You feed on X is largely populated by sort of right wing talking points and Trump gifs. And really, this weekend, for the first time, I started to see Gavin Newsom memes that
Yeah.
portray him in a flattering way. Are we finally starting to see Newsom become, the real left, counterweight to Donald Trump here?
Yeah, we've seen him aim for those moments a lot. He sort of started to really wear that role in the response to military on the streets of Los Angeles in the wake of those ICE protests. Look, I think this is a high stakes bet for Gavin Newsom. The California effort is not guaranteed to succeed in November, and I think it's going to be a real test of his ability to galvanize voters around something like this. It's going to be really revealing about his political capital and political power. It's also going to be revealing about whether Democrats are ready and willing to fight fire with fire, as Gavin Newsom says, or are folks still clinging on to the sort of Michelle Obama era of they go low, we go high, right? Because this gerrymandering is something that Democrats for a long time have said, no, like Republicans do this. This is a bad thing for democracy. We're not going to play that game. Are they changing their tune now that the stakes are as high as they are, and could have a serious impact on the future of the Democratic Party and the makeup of Congress? There's a lot here that I'm going to be watching really closely as signs of how these two parties are going to play this game.
Yeah, same. I'm really interested in the implications the redistricting wars have for the 2028 primaries on both sides of the aisle. Of course, Vice President J.D. Vance has been a big figure here, traveling to Indiana and trying to coax Republican
Yeah.
lawmakers here towards the redistricting efforts. So we're going to be watching all that play out. And as always, we like to end the show with something from the Playbook newsletter. And today, Dasha, that's an early casualty from the federal crackdown on Washington, which is restaurant reservations. According to data from the restaurant booking platform OpenTable, since Trump began his federalization push, dining reservations have plunged by 27% compared,
Whoa.
yeah, to the same time last year. Dash, I'm curious, have your restaurant reservations declined over the last week? What's the mood like in your sort of social outings that you've had?
Oh, and I mean, I'm a huge foodie, so there's very little that can keep me from making a reservation at some of my favorite spots. But that's really fascinating. I actually think like our culture of eating and gathering together can often say a whole lot about the broader situation, politically, culturally. So it's really interesting to see. I mean, I think there are a lot of these symptoms, right, of sort of the primary action that this White House takes, the knock on effects that are really telling and sometimes unexpected.
Well, we're wishing wishing every listener to the podcast an easy and fast and painless reservation process.
And a good breakfast, lunch, and dinner today.
That's right.
Eat your square meals, folks.
Yeah. Send us your tips, birthdays, or spotted moments, as always, to playbook@politico.com. Dasha, thanks so much for being here. It's going to be a wild week.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody. Buckle up.
And that's all for today's show, but we have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great Monday.
Thanks for listening.